The other week I treated myself to these super cute Etchr mini palettes. These are tiny ceramic palettes that fit in your hand and have room for 19 colours. So make yourself a cup of tea, get cosy, get comfortable, and we'll take a closer look at the palettes, the watercolours I'll be filling them with, and my thought process when I'm putting together colour palettes in general. Each 19 well palette comes in a little tin with a lid, and it also comes with an additional mixing palette, but I'm not going to be using these as mixing palettes. You'll see what I do with them later. But you also get swatch cards that you can keep track of the colours in your palette too. I'm going to be filling mine with my Wallace Seymour watercolours. I have several of these now and they've always just been in tubes, and now is the time to put them in a palette. So I'm pretty excited about this. I'm going to take you on this journey with me and hopefully it will inspire you too. It's a beautiful sunny day and there's a lot of sunlight coming in from the window, so hopefully you can see this okay. But I've been sitting here on the floor of the studio trying to work out exactly how to lay out these palettes, and whenever I'm faced with anything like this it seems quite overwhelming because there are so many different options. But with the palette you get this little swatch card, and I actually found it easier looking at that than looking at the palette itself, because if I look at that it looks quite confusing to me, sort of overwhelming, whereas this you can quite clearly see how they've marked it out, and it's like a little pie with each of these being a slice of the pie. So in each slice you have 3 colours. So I decided to group them that way. So we have Payne's Grey Original in the middle, so that's a sort of bluish grey. And then I've got violet colours there, pinks, and then going through into the blues, and then blue greens, and through into all of the greens. So in this palette I decided to have all of my greens, blues, pinks and violets. And I thought that kind of makes sense to me, and then use the other palette for earth colours. So I'm going to show you that in a moment, but we only have space for 19 colours in each palette. So I have 41 colours in total. They're not all over there. I've got some on the desk. So I'm going to have to cut 3 because I can only fit 38 colours in. So I've taken 3 colours out because they're in other palettes, which I'm going to show you in a moment. But this kind of made sense to me, and I think it's quite logical. Well, at least it is to me, the way I've laid it out. And I think it will also look really nice. So I'm going to show you the Earths palette next, and then we'll get to the fun part of actually filling these. So this time I've started with the black in the centre, which is called Rhymer's Soot, onto a dark grey and a sort of warmish brown grey up here. And then I moved round into, these are slightly greenish yellowish earths, and then the ochres, and then round into the browns and the very reddish rusty orange colours here, and then onto these more subtle pinkish browns. There was one here that's called Torridon Sandstone, and it's very pink, but it felt like it was more of an earth than one that should go in the other palette. So I always find this with colours, it's like sometimes you're going to get colours that would fit in both categories, if that makes sense. But this definitely seemed like it fitted in with this Earths palette. And then we have these ones here, which are all very pale, so really pale greys. I think this looks really nice. I think it will be a good way of dividing these up. For me, it seemed to be the way that I'm probably going to want to use these palettes and make sense for my brain, but everyone is different, and when you put together a palette it just has to be exactly how you work and what inspires you. I love to see earth colours together, and I love to see blues and greens together. So for me, this is the logical way of doing it. So what I think I'll do is pop you in the overhead holder now and just film me filling these palettes. I may speed it up, I may do a voiceover, I don't know, we'll see. I'll see what's necessary, but I think it's going to take me a long time, so I can't do it in real time, but I'm really, really looking forward to this. Okay, so I filmed this. I actually filmed about an hour's worth of footage of me filling these palettes, and it was boring AF. So basically, we have about 1 minute of me filling these palettes because nobody needs to see that kind of footage. Anyway, I'll see you at the end of this minute, and I'll be back in real time for a little chat. I've just finished filling the second one of these, and how cute do they look? They look absolutely adorable, and I think they're going to be perfect to keep on the desk because they're not very big, and so they're not going to take up a lot of space, but I'll have 38 colours just there at my fingertips, which is incredible. So they're going to be great for working on, I would imagine, like smaller pieces of work or when I'm working in my sketchbook. And in the end, I decided not to include much of the footage of me filling them. It was just, I felt a bit boring. I may have said this, by the way, in a voiceover. I'm going to do a voiceover for parts of this vlog later. But yeah, I just felt it was boring. I thought it was more interesting for me to show you the finished palettes and just talk to you a bit about the colours. So what I decided to do is, I'm going to get my paintbrush so that I can point without covering things up with my hands. I decided to get a micron pen, so one of these, the Pigma Micron Archival ink pen. They're waterproof, so I knew that if I wrote the names of the paints in, that when I painted over the top it wouldn't smudge it. I didn't expect it to be quite so opaque actually. I thought that the names would show through a little bit more, but I can just about see them. And I did this one as I was going along, and it just made the whole process of filling the palette and stopping and doing that so long-winded. I wanted to have the fun of filling the palette this time without actually having to fill in the swatch card. So I'm going to do that after this video. But I thought it'd be interesting for you to see how it looks with just the writing on as opposed to being filled in with all the colours. But I think this one's going to look really nice because I love how these colours look together. So one thing that I discovered when I was filling these, because the wells are so tiny, it's really easy to overfill them. So on this one, I ended up spending so much time wiping away excess paint, which then spilled over the edges and was threatening to go into the other wells. And it was a bit stressful. It sounds funny, but it was a bit stressful. And I ended up getting my hands covered in paint and having to go and wash them every few pans. So maybe every 3 pans or so, I would have to go and wash my hands because I ended up covered in paint. This one was much, much more successful. So I'm going to hold these up actually. Let me just stand up and let's bring these up. Hold it like that and focus in. So this one I did yesterday, And you can see already it's starting, as it's drying, some of the pans of paint are starting to kind of dent in. Is that the right word? Sink in. And so what I'll probably do is, when they've dried a little bit more, I'll just add some extra paint to the bits where it's really indented. And so that's how it looks. Shall I hold it like that? Is that a bit better? Can you see now? So yeah, that's how it looks after it's been drying for a day. And this is how a freshly filled one looks. It's so satisfying to fill these up, and it really was a lot of fun. I found it much more enjoyable not to do the swatch card at the same time. So, well, it could be down to your personal preference, I guess, but if you're going to fill one of these, I would say do the filling, label your swatch card so you know what you're filling, but then do the swatching afterwards, because it's just so much fun to gradually fill each little well with paint. So that one will be left to dry today. There you go, then you can see that and how that looks. I tried to be as neat as possible. And let's bring that one up so you can just see how that looks. But the best way of seeing these colours is to show you the big swatches I have here. So I think, let's just refocus that. So I think I'm going to share these with you, and then I'm going to show you some other little palettes, kind of limited palettes of colours from Wallace Seymour that I've put together. And yeah, then we'll wrap this video up. But I will be working with these in the future, and I'll be able to show you just how I'm using them. But I really wanted to talk to you about the colours and about the experience of putting these little palettes together. By the way, this is a bottle of gum arabic. I had this beside me throughout the entire process because I did think that I might just add a couple of drops here and there. You can use this, or you can use glycerine, I think it is another good thing to add to paints that you think might be a little bit hard to re-wet once they're dry, because I noticed there's a lot of difference in the texture and the, I don't know what's the word, viscosity of these paints. Some of them are really firm and they dry really quickly once you've put them in the pan, and they're really like solid, they don't run anywhere. And there are others that seem to just run everywhere. So some of the more solid ones, I did think that I might have to add some of this, but in these small palettes I actually didn't. But I'm going to show you some palettes in a moment that have larger wells, and in certain cases I did add a drop or two of that and just mixed it in with a cocktail stick. So you may have seen that in the fast forwarded footage. Every time I poured a colour in to the well, I gave it a little stir with a cocktail stick. It just makes sure that the binder is mixed with the pigment nicely, and also that there aren't any air bubbles and stuff like that. It just makes sure it's nicely in the pan. So yeah, I was doing that as I went along as well. But what I'll do is just move these out of the way, and then I'll talk you through the colours in each palette and just give you a closer look at these really special colours, because I am a huge fan of Wallace Seymour colours, and I've been building up my collection over the past few years, so I thought it'd be nice just to have a bit of a closer look at them. So let's start with the first palette I filled, and we started with Payne's Grey Original. They do two different types of Payne's Grey. This is their normal Payne's Grey, which is significantly less expensive than that one. This one is one of their, I want to say one of their most expensive paints. I think it's in, like, they do different series, and I think it's in series E, if I'm not mistaken, and it was quite an expensive one, but I loved the beautiful subtle colour and the granulation. I just felt it was a really interesting one to have, and I'm a huge Payne's Grey fan, so that's why I went with that one. Despite the fact that it was quite expensive, but I'm glad I have it. And I like the fact that it actually occupies the biggest pan in this palette. So the other one is just a normal Payne's Grey. It's a very violet lighty purplish Payne's grey. Some of them lean more towards being a bluish grey, but this is very purple. But it's a really pretty colour. And then we have Morellone, I don't know whether I'm saying this correctly, Caput Mortem Violet. This is a beautiful granulating and almost colour separating type of colour. You can really see when you use a rough paper how the dark pigment seems to really come through and creates this amazing texture. Blue John, this is a really interesting mineral pigment, and it's, I don't know, I just really love its subtle colour. I think you're either probably going to love this or hate it. You're going to think it's a bit boring, or you're going to think it's really, really nice. I love this kind of colour, something a bit muted and subtle. So, by the way, it looks really nice next to that Payne's Grey original, doesn't it? So yeah, I'm glad I have that. I think that was one of their more expensive ones as well, because it's mined at the Blue John mine in Derbyshire, I believe. And I've actually been past that mine. I didn't go in. You could go in and have a tour or something like that, but we didn't go in. But yeah, it's really nice to have that. I don't know why I'm putting all of these on this side and leaving the Payne's Grey, but there we go. Potter's Pink, really lovely, natural looking, muted, kind of vintage looking, earthy pink. I always like to have that. This one is, I don't know how to pronounce that, but basically flesh tint. It reminds me a little bit of the Shell Pink Holbein paint, this one, but it is light fast, which is brilliant, because a lot of pinks aren't really light fast. This is Thewelite, and this is another mineral colour. It's a very, very pale pink, really subtle and really beautiful. I'm loving how these pinks look with the Payne's Grey. Maybe we'll put this one on this side. Biera Blue, I don't know how you say that, but a lovely rich inky blue. Lapis Ashes, this is one of my favourites. So this is like the, I don't know, I want to say it's like the remnants of lapis lazuli. I think lapis lazuli is how we say it in the UK. Every single time I have to say the name of that paint, I forget how it's pronounced, because so many people pronounce it differently and I keep hearing all sorts of different versions. Anyway, this is like a grey blue or a blue grey. Absolutely beautiful. I love the subtlety of some of these colours. Just look how gorgeous they look next to each other. So Lakeland Slate is another one that's really interesting. If you use a lot of water with this one, you get all sorts of different colours coming through, and it's just so nice. Now this one is named after an artist. Now how do you say this person's name? Dufay? Is that correct? I don't know. Really lovely, bright, turquoisey, greeny blue. And you'll see that my preference is obviously for more earthy and muted colours, but occasionally I like to have something that's a little bit brighter in there. I just thought it would be interesting to have that one. So this one is Vivianite Blue Ochre, another gorgeous moody greeny blue or bluey green. And this one is also named after an artist. Why do they have such difficult names? Duguay? Is that how you say that? I have no idea. But apparently, I think he used to paint shadows of trees or something like that in this kind of colour. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure I read that somewhere. But it's a really lovely, very dark green. It reminds me a little bit of Peroline green. So Permanent Sapped Green. This one is just another lovely, rich, darker green. Good for landscapes. So this is why I have so many greens. This one's Vulcanskite. I don't know how you say that. Green Genuine. I'm sorry that I'm mangling all the names. It's really, really hard, especially when you're on camera, to get it right. And I don't know how to pronounce it, but you can see what it says. This one's a really nice sort of grainy, it has kind of like these little grainy bits in it. Also quite granulating and a really nice natural looking green. I do love to have a lot of natural looking greens in my palette. I know that you can mix greens, but I'm just the kind of person who loves to have lots of nice ready to go kind of greens. So this is Bohemian Green Earth Genuine. That's really lovely too, kind of similar to the one before, but a little bit paler. And then we have a really nice Terre Verte, which is sort of slightly more blue, which is really nice. And these two are kind of similar. Honister Green Slate Pale and Ingleton Green Earth. They do vary a little bit though. Hopefully you can see that if I put them side by side. This one's a sort of cooler version of this, but really lovely muted pale greens. So that is that palette. There are all the colours I have in there. And then if we move on to the Earths palette, so the black I have is called Rhymer's Soot, and when you paint with that, it actually smells like how you would imagine coal to smell, or how coal does smell. It smells like that. It smells sort of earthy. It's interesting when you use paints like this because they do smell different to like the more common mass-produced kind of paints. Trossack Mudstone, a lovely dark grey, almost like a charcoal grey, that one. Davies Grey, Oxford Mudstone, lovely warm brownish grey. Oxford Bluestone Green Earth. This is another interesting colour, and I sort of feel like some of these colours aren't really replicated in like more commercial paints, would you say, like the bigger brands. I feel like they're quite unique, and I did actually make a video on these paints a while ago. I said that then, they're so unique and beautiful, but it's been so nice to actually finally put them in little palettes, because I'd had them in the tubes ever since I'd bought them, and I find that I just don't use paints as much if they're in the tubes as I do if I have a palette ready to just grab and work from. So for me, this is how I like to work. I like to make curated palettes, and then it inspires me. It means that the paints are all there, just ready to go. I don't have to get lots of tubes and kind of decide what I'm using and then squeeze them all out. I've just got them here. I really like that. So the next one we have is Green Earth Light. I think this is just one of the most beautiful colours. This gorgeous pale, muted yellow green. It's a really natural colour and just so lovely. Burgundy Yellow Ochre. It's a really lovely rich ochre. And Burnt Umber Extra Dark is the dark brown I have in this palette. It's kind of similar, I guess, to like a castle brown a little bit, something like that. I'm really getting into Burnt Umber just lately. It's not a colour I used to use a lot, but now I really, really love it. I used to have sepia. My browns were like sepia, burnt sienna and raw umber. And now I'm really loving a burnt umber. And also a raw sienna is a new thing that I'm loving recently. It's not something I used to use a lot. I used to tend to use yellow ochre, which is kind of similar, but I'm loving both of those now. Mermaid Egg, that's a really interesting name and just a really lovely natural brown colour. And then we're on to the more reddish browns. So Borders Red, Rudstone Natural Iron Clay Ochre, Burnt Sienna, Bagnoli Monte Amiata, Aran Red Sandstone. Really just so many lovely rich reddish browns. Morton Whetstone, you can see that one's quite granulating, interesting colour. So these are the more pinkish browns. Torridon River Gravel, this one has like a slight texture, like a sandy texture. And Torridon Sandstone Kishorn Pink. Very, very pretty colour and a very interesting texture. Again, it's like this almost grainy, like gritty kind of texture, which is really nice. If you like texture in your paintings like I do, these paints are really good ones to have. So the last three, we have Lochaber. Is that how you say that? Quartz mica. This is a really nice pale bluish grey, and again it has this really interesting sort of graininess to it. I wouldn't call it granulation, because granulation is something that's a little bit different. This is more like a grittiness with little grains in it, which is really interesting. And then Citadella grey schist and Marat white quartz are both kind of similar. This one's a bit paler, but they all have this really interesting texture. And there we go. So let's have a quick look at the other palettes I put together, the more limited colour palettes. And yeah, then I think that will be it for today. So these little palettes came with these ones, as you will have seen earlier, and they're actually meant to be mixing palettes, so they don't come with a little swatch chart, but I decided to use them because I have lots of mixing palettes. I don't need any more. I decided that I would use them as like little mini limited palettes. So each one has 7 colours in it. And let's just put that one aside while I show you this one. So in the centre of this one, we have the Payne's Grey original. And then I did Green Earth Light. So we put that like that. So Green Earth Light is there. Then we have Ingleton Green Earth. So these have been drying for, I think, probably a good couple of weeks now, which is why they're really cracked. I might fill in some of the cracks actually. I might do something about that, or I might not. I might just start using them. And it hasn't been a problem in that they don't feel like they're going to fall out of the palette even though they're cracking. So I may just leave them. I think it's probably fine. Vivianite Blue Ochre is the other colour we have in there. And then Burnt Umber, Extra Dark, Rudstone, Natural Iron Clay Ochre and Mermaid Egg. Let me just check. They are all on the screen. Yeah, they kind of are. So those ones I thought would be a really nice versatile palette, like a limited palette for landscapes and any nature subjects really. Even botanicals I think would look quite nice with this colour palette. So that is that one, and I'm really excited to start using these. I haven't used them, I've just left them to dry because I've been busy with other things. So that's what we have in that palette. Let's just gather these up, pop those over there, because we have another one here. And in this one, well, the middle colour is actually one that I didn't include in either of these two palettes, and it is the sepia hue, which is a really interesting and lovely colour. It's not what I would think of when I think of sepia. It's much more grey. It's like this really cool toned dark grey. So that's in the centre, and I don't have the tube of that anymore because I used it all up. It's actually in one of my other palettes too. So I poured the rest of it into the centre there. And then I also have Duguay green in here. Lapis Ashes is another colour I popped in here. The Citadella Grey Schist and Trossack Mudstone, Iron Plum. That's another colour I didn't put in either of these because I knew it was in this palette, and it's very similar to the Payne's Grey, the normal Payne's Grey, not the Payne's Grey original. I felt they were too similar, so as it was already in another palette, it didn't go in that one. And then we have Blue John. So I love the way this palette is. It's almost like a dreamy kind of colour palette. It's so soft and it's gentle and misty, but it also has a bit of drama. So you've got the sepia, the Trossack Mudstone and the Iron Plum, which, oh, I guess, and that green, which kind of add a little bit more depth and richness against these lovely, pale, really gentle, soft colours. So again, I'm really excited to use this one. I think you could make some gorgeous landscapes from this one too, but it will be interesting to see what it inspires, because I am just in love with that colour palette. The only other colour that I haven't shown you yet, that isn't in any of these palettes, is the Magnetite. So this is a really interesting colour. It has a lot of texture. And the reason that it isn't or didn't find a place in either of those palettes or those palettes is because it's in this one here. So this is, let me move these out of the way. Just get those out of the way. So this is the Peg and All, I think it's called the Etchr Painter's Palette or something like that. And it has a little leather cover and it's made of maple. Let's just open that up. It's like a little travel palette. And I filled this with 5 Wallace Seymour paints and 1 Daniel Smith gouache in buff titanium. Now this was based on a colour palette I saw that I think her name is Jean Oliver used to have on her site. It was called the Paris set of colours, and she had 6 Wallace Seymour colours. Buff titanium was one of them. Well, I don't have the Wallace Seymour buff titanium, and so I didn't want to just buy it to make this palette. I've always loved the colour combination in this palette, but I didn't want to buy another buff titanium. I have several buff titaniums because I love the colour. So I thought I would use the Daniel Smith gouache for that one. But we have in here, let me see if I can remember, Morton Whetstone. Let me get them, just lay them out so that you can see how they look as a little palette. So the colours in this little 6 colour palette are the Magnetite with its really interesting texture, the Lakeland Slate, which looks incredible when you use a lot of water with it, or it can look really dramatic, the Davies Grey Oxford Mudstone, the Honister Green Slate Pale, and the Morton Whetstone. So with the buff titanium too, this makes a really interesting 6 colour palette. So when I bought this little one as a treat to myself, because I saw it and I was just like, I love the Peg and All products anyway. I have a lot of different Peg and All products and I use them all the time. So I thought this would be an interesting little travel palette to take with me and to pop into my Sendak artist roll. So you have your little mixing space here, and I love the fact that you can cover it over with this leather cover and it just pops in the artist roll. So yeah, I was thinking about which 6 colours to put in there, and I ended up deciding upon the Paris set of colours that Jean Oliver had put together, and I'd seen it a while ago and it stayed in my mind as being a really lovely limited palette of 6 colours. So yeah, that's what's in there. So there we go, several cute little palettes that I've recently treated myself to, and I hope that this means that now I'm going to start using the Wallace Seymour colours more. I absolutely love them and I do use them in my work. It's just that I found that I wasn't using them as much as I could and as much as I wanted to. So I hope that that has inspired you. I hope that perhaps you've discovered some new colours that you love. That's what I hope to do on this channel, is just inspire you. Okay, so if you're still with me at this point where I've rambled on about colours and palettes forever, let's think, what could the word be? Let's choose a paint name, shall we? That would be fun. I want you to write mermaid egg in the comments if at this point you are still with me, and then that way I'll know that you watched to the end. Okay, thanks everyone. Give the video a thumbs up if you like watercolour content and you love talking about colour palettes, you love thinking about colour palettes, you get excited about colour palettes. Yeah, give it a thumbs up because it does help the video to reach more people on YouTube. And thank you so much for being here and for joining me and for allowing me to show you some of my paint collection and my lovely new palettes. Okay, see you soon. Bye for now.